Hello, I'm Will Yeoman, CEO of Writing WA, and welcome to another episode, not just of Pod Street, but of the Pod Well Travelled for the West travel section of the West Australian. And it's my great pleasure today to welcome to the podcast Howard Gray. Howard, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, William. Thanks, anyone who's listening in. Terrific to get the chance to talk a little bit about a lot of things, I guess.
Indeed, we're going to have a I suspect, a wide-ranging conversation today, but we're particularly focusing on Howard's new book, Abrolhos, Keep Your Eyes Open. And there's a little story behind that title as well, which I'm sure we'll get into. But first of all, for people who don't know Howard or his work, let's have a little bit of a biography from him. Howard has been captivated by the marine ecosystems and rich maritime history of the Abrolhos since his first visit in 1980. Through diving and exploring trips and delving into the scientific research material and historical archives, he's built up a considerable knowledge of this amazing archipelago. Investigating the rock lobster fishery for his Ph.D. and the life of Frederick de Houtman for the 400th anniversary of the discovery of these islands has extended his research. He's actively contributed to many organisations, including the Abrolhos Islands Consultative Council, and is a founding member and chair of the Batavia Coast Marine Heritage Association and the Batavia Coast Foundation. He's the author of several award-winning maritime-themed books and has been acknowledged at local and state levels for his community service. His passion for this remarkable location and knowledge of the island's changing moods and seasons is shared in radio segments, articles, and as a tour guide and guest lecturer. So, Howard, you are eminently qualified to be writing about the Abrolhos, I think.
Well, it's interesting that it's 100 k's from one end to the other and 20 k's across, and it takes you many, many years to actually get your bearings and learn all the little ins and outs of the place. And I've been fortunate, to be able to get out there in many different guises and then extending my research and studies into the archival historical stuff. And so, you end up with a pretty rich knowledge of a pretty rich place, yeah.
No, absolutely. Now, before we started recording today, we were just talking a little bit about the quality, not just the writing quality and the research quality, but the production quality of these books. And I do have a selection of the other books here, and they are completely out of this world. I mean, you can say quality coffee table books. I know I mean that as a compliment. I mean, they're just so beautiful to look at, beautiful to handle, beautiful to read. Why is it important to you when you're telling a story such as the Abrolhos that you have the necessary images, the necessary stories, and you're such a great storyteller as well? This is no dry as dust academic tome. We should make an emphasis on that. So, I mean, how do you go about producing a book such as Abrolhos? Keep your eyes open.
Well, you burn a lot of midnight oil to start with. But I guess one of the things I do is obviously, I like to give the context to the stories, the background to the stories, and lead into them, and not tell the beginning at the end, So there's a reason. What's going to happen next? Sort of building the story as you go, and searching out the images. Over the course of decades, I've picked up a lot of my own images, sort of underwater, above water stuff, and all the historical things as well, and using those to tell the story where they can, so that you're not describing things if you can put a picture alongside. And I guess the other thing I do is I write I do all the formatting and stuff myself.
Yes.
And I found the landscape format works really well, and you can, put things together, and you get your words down to the number that will fit in the space that's available, and you get to be very concise and very specific in getting your message across. And so working away at that, over a long time, how people did it in the days before computers is beyond me. Some of the old writers, they just think, they sat down with a pen and pencil and that was it, Whereas nowadays it might go through 100 iterations before you're happy with it, So, I guess that's the process, just gathering up the material over the years. I tend to work in a chronological way. I think that always works effectively in most cases. And piece it together and then find interesting bits. And there's no shortage of interesting maritime stories along the West Coast, that's for sure.
No, absolutely. And I'm wondering, though, what specifically has fascinated you for so long about the Houtman-Abrolhos archipelago? And I should say that you've broken down the contents in the book beautifully too, because you deal first with the natural history and then the human history, and both are so rich. So I guess that partly answers my question.
I think, one of the things, we're going to appreciate this a lot more in coming centuries, I think, is that all human activity and so on is actually a response to the environment, So understanding that in the first place was important in this book. What is the background to these islands? How do they form? What goes on with the ocean currents and the atmosphere around them? What does that result in terms of plant life and animal life, marine life, and so on? And then how is that sort of, when it gets into the history, all of those things come into play in determining, what humans have been up to at the Abrolhos, whether it be gathering bird shit or whether it be, chasing rock lobster in the water or whatever else, or whether it be just out there enjoying the beautiful fish you see when you're snorkeling around. All of those things ultimately, the tourism, whatever, go back to that initial part about the natural history. And so that's why I thought it's really important that people have a really good understanding of that. And it's such a fascinating place. Really doesn't get the focus that the Barrier Reef or the Ningaloo Reef or even the Kimberley and places get, but it rivals all of those. And many times I run into people who say, I've dived all over the world, but I've enjoyed the Abrolhos diving more than anywhere, Once you understand what's going on, what you're looking at, why is it so, is that big question, it really just makes it such an endlessly fascinating place. And you might think you get bored with it, but every time you go out there, it's a bit different. Something's happened, and you say, "What's going on?"
You find something
so
new.
I love it.
Yes. I mean, do you think a part of the fascination over the years, as you say, it's not properly as popular as Rottnest and so forth, but nevertheless, it's still very much a high-profile visitation area for a lot of tourists, I guess. Do you think part of that is still that the romance that attaches to the shipwreck situation, like the Batavia and so forth?
Yeah, there's all that. It's a bit hard to get to, when it's protected by oceans, waves and windy weather and so on for much of the time. And so it is a pretty special opportunity to get out there. A lot of people haven't, even local people around Geraldton where I live have, never had the chance to get out there. So it's got that sense of remoteness, and it's got that sense of, that shipwreck wonder and all of those sorts of things that go with it. If you're looking for a tropical paradise in the normal sense it's portrayed, with palm trees and gin bars or something, I don't know, it's cocktail bars. It's, it's not like that at all. It really is, you're in touch with the environment from the moment you get out there to when you leave, the wind, the waves, the smell, everything's just so responsive to what's going on around. So in terms of immersing yourself in nature, there's probably nowhere that you go that you don't feel that you feel it as much as you do as out there. So that's I think a big part of the attraction. And it's just protected partly by its remoteness and the weather and the sea conditions, but those who get out there just love it here.
Yeah, like I guess that goes back to what you were saying about those other more popular places are generally those that are have more facilities and so forth geared up for tourists. But for tourists looking for something like the qualities you've just outlined, the Abrolhos is perfect. But you also touch on the book about the impact of tourism and so forth, and about being responsibly. Visited by people and so forth, and as a guide, you will be across all this. So, I mean, how is that going? Are people generally respectful? Is tourism of the Abrolhos sustainable at the moment, or is it still an issue in some cases?
Yeah, well, I think it's I do get involved. Work on a little boat called Eco Abrolhos that does 5-day trips, and a couple of others that do 2 or 3 day trips through there, and one of the reasons I got involved with those is to try and tell the stories and make sure the stories are accurately about the history, the natural history, and that people do get to appreciate it in that way. So that is, one of the reasons, partly, I guess, behind the book, or hopes with the book, is that it does create a knowledge resource there that other people can tap into, so they do appreciate it a lot more for what it is, and they are able to tell the stories. Parks and Wildlife now, National DBCA are now managing it, and a lot of management plans put in place, and so we'll progressively see things develop. It'd be great to see some bird hides and stuff, so people get a chance to get closer to the millions of seabirds that are nesting in different places at times. But knowledgeable guides are the main need that we have out there. So hopefully, this as a resource will help that happen.
No, absolutely. I think it's like a very luxurious guidebook in a way. It's just like something you want to have on you either before or after your visit, possibly after because it's a little bit on the heavy side.
Yeah.
But I mean that weight. I don't mean in terms of writing, of course. So I feel like it's also, as I say, you were very, very kind to furnish me with some of the other books, and I guess those are almost like you could almost see them as expanded versions, even though they came before this book, of certain chapters in this book, aren't they? Like you've got, Spice at Any Price, The Life and Times of Frederick de Houtman, and then you've got The Western Rog Lobster, not one, but two books on that. Sort of a fictional sort of epistolary or diary account, Lucretia's Batavian Diary, which looks amazing, and I can't wait to read that next. So, look, I mean, it's almost like you've got a family of books. So I guess that's what I'm trying to say, that are all devoted to this area.
The first book I wrote, I'd spent a couple of years up on Christmas Island and wrote a little book called Christmas Island Naturally, and that went really, really well. And so when I came to live in Geraldton, got out to the Abrolhos, one of my friends, I often blame him for this, one of my friends said, that I'd made a fisherman out there, said, you should do a book on the Abrolhos. This is back in 1980 or something.
Wow.
And so it's always been lingering in my mind, and then other things come along. I got totally fascinated by the research and the Western rock lobster because we were diving for those a lot and, learned a lot about their habits, and eventually thought, there's a great story here, I'll put that together. A friend was going to put together the history side of it and didn't get around to it, so that ended up falling to me to do that as well. And so that led to a lot of interviews with fishermen and researchers and managers and just everyone you can think of in the rock lobster industry. And that was a wonderful experience, and that ended up becoming a Ph.D. and the book. So, so these sort of things just build one on another. And I guess then the next bit, I did a history of the Geraldton Fishermen's Co-op for them, their 50 years. And then when I retired, I'd done a few other little things, but I got a little bit frustrated by some of the takes on the Batavia story. They either were, serious academic works or archaeological works, or some of them went off into a bit too much, I thought, conjecture and manipulating things when there wasn't any need to do that. So, and just trying to capture what it was like to live through it. And so that's where the genesis came from for the idea of using Lucretia, who was a femme fatale in the whole story, in the midst of it the whole way, to tell what it might have been like to live through it. And that's proved very popular. Then, of course, when we were getting up to the 400th anniversary of the discovery of the Abrolhos, and even for this current book, I was trying to, who was this guy Houtman who discovered the Abrolhos, and started tracking him down and found the most amazing story around Frederick de Houtman, and so I spent a lot of time in the Netherlands chasing his life, and found just the incredible maps and charts and paintings, and his whole life story was just unbelievable, and somebody who should be part of Australian history as well. And so that's how that one came together. So they sort of one leads to another. I had a contract to do a bit of writing for signage on the Geraldton foreshore, and I gathered up bits and pieces over the years around Geraldton, and that ended up becoming the Champion Bay book, Jambimbiri Champion Bay. Just remarkable history around this little bay, and so much happened there. So it's pretty much a history of Geraldton. So they sort of, as you say, one leads into the other, and you build up your knowledge and so on. So it's been really good fun doing them. It consumes a fair bit of time and energy, but at the end of the day, it's I think they've been a worthwhile contribution to the town.
No, absolutely. And I was thinking too, you were saying, it's an enjoyable process, but is there any particular part of the process that you enjoy the most? And that's probably an invidious question. I mean, because as an explorer, field researcher and so forth, that's one side, a very more sort of active out in the world side. And then there's the writing process and the research process itself, which is much more, I guess, interior and solitary in a way.
Yeah, no, these days, as I've said, a lot of the the time just, tracking down specialists in particular areas, or particular people have had a part to play in things. And, you end up making some great contacts and great friendships and things through all of that. I keep saying to people, it's not about the book eventually, it's about all the fun along the way. And then, of course, these days with the internet and all of the search engines and stuff there, you go chasing off down all the rabbit holes and you find these little things, you find specimens from the Abrolhos of 1840 in the British Museum, and you find paintings that were done about the same time in the Adelaide Art Gallery, and it's just amazing. And you find these things, they're just brilliant little revelations and things that nobody's seen before. I was looking at showing you a photograph to somebody yesterday, which is done by a guy who's doing aerial photography of all of the chasing tuna schools around Australia during the war. You wouldn't believe. Anyway, he flew over the Abrolhos Islands, and so there's these shots of the Abrolhos Islands which have never been revealed before, and on them, knowing other history, I can say, there's this jetty, and see that boat there, I bet you that's the Suomi. So all of these things linked together, and you can identify things because and come up with things simply because of the depth and breadth of knowledge you've got around.
You've got around, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, other people wouldn't take it in.
No, you must start to feel that almost everything's connected in some way the more you go on and find all these different connections.
Yeah. And so that's, I think that's, and then you start reflecting on where we all fit into the system, scheme of things, like you say, and
Indeed. Now, the next question I wanted to ask you from a purely bookish perspective, I suppose, is Australian Books your own imprint, and what the advantages are with establishing your own, publishing house as opposed to offering books to other pre-existing publishers, for example, Fremantle Press or
well, I've been down that track, and originally with Christmas Island, I had that with a publisher, and he sat on it for a couple of years and didn't get very far with it, and and obviously it turned out it wasn't going too well financially, and so I more or less had to take all my material back. He lost a lot of my photographs, and by that stage I had it all pretty much sorted and went off to Singapore and got it printed. And once, the market was a Christmas Island market, and it sold there incredibly well over the years. So then later on, when I brought out other books, I went to see different publishers, and a lot of them have, like maybe a list of 10 or 20 that they've got in the backlog anyway that they're working on. So even getting something done promptly with them is hard. A lot of them then want to adapt and change things in a lot, which I wasn't, no writers ever going to be happy with that probably. And often they want you to put money up as well, and then they say, can you help market it? So you find yourself, faced with doing all of the work for them. And them taking, at the end of the day, maybe paying you 10% for the books they sell. So the books I've done have had a very localized, specific market which can be targeted, and so that's what has been enough to sort of make them worthwhile to print. You don't make it any, at the end of the day, you're trying to get your money back. Occasionally they sort of head off into profitability, but because they're specific markets and they're filling a niche and a need. And I've had a little bit of financial backing, through being employed in other things, to be able to do it. But it's been worthwhile. And now when I look across and see the 7 or 8 books out under that, I think, it's quite a significant little quiver of books.
No, absolutely. And I also like the idea that they are readily available. I was reading, the list of some of the stockers, such as the Maritime Museum, the Bullabardip Museum, which is right near us here at the Rolling WA office. Yeah. That makes them very accessible, doesn't it, to the general public?
Yeah, well, the museums, because they're related to museum type topics, they're a very obvious outlet, and we support each other in that regard, and that works out really well. Getting them further afield, into libraries and interstate and internationally, and those sort of things are, you really need to put a lot of time into marketing, and it's not something I've done because I'm too busy working on the next one usually. But I'm always happy to help people out and give people the advantage of my mistakes and what things I have learned along the way, and so often do that and see how it goes. I haven't gone into the ebook side of things. Sometimes a little bit reluctant these days. We just find that AI is just going to take it all away from you anyway. But so I'm not sure where that will go.
Yeah, and also I get the feeling that your kinds of books probably wouldn't be as well suited to ebooks. Novels, or just paperback novels, no problem.
Yeah.
But something like this, which is so beautiful and lavish, you really want the physical thing. So yeah, I think you might be right there in avoiding that for now, anyway.
Yeah, and you can't do everything. So it's but it's been very, very rewarding, and particularly as a in retirement, because I've been retired for about 10 years now from a science teaching career and education career, and and as I've said, it creates it gives you a pretty rich retirement life when you're doing this sort of thing. And the things that come through with the book writing too is it then gives you a little bit of I guess people look at it and say, well, he seems to know what he's talking about. So let's have a chat with him, as you are doing.
Well, exactly. And also, when you talk about being an educator as well, you haven't really retired from that, because this is doing the same thing, isn't it? It's informing people. It's just one step removed, I guess. You're not standing in front of in a lecture theatre or a classroom.
Yeah, exactly. And there's such great stories, just
absolutely
trying to build people's sense of place and, and just their pride and where they live and all those sorts of things. You need to do it. And as I said at the beginning, places like Lord Howe Island and Norfolk Island, the Barrier Reef and these sort of places, highly publicised, and lots of photography hits the scenes, lots of stories out there. But, the Abrolhos beats them all hands down, I'm sorry.
Wow, that's a big claim. That'll entice more people to head up there and see what the fuss is all about.
Yeah. No, it's at least equal with them, and it's just been overlooked, and
yes.
Partly that's because there isn't the resource material for people to tap into.
Well, indeed, and you're obviously rectifying that. Now, I should just say before I forget, people can head onto your website as well, which is Westralianbooks, all one word, .com.au, and we mentioned some of the places where the books are available. Was there anywhere else that people should know about?
Geraldton Fishermen's Co-op,
yes.
The museums, the Shipwrecks Gallery in Fremantle, the Boulevard of Geraldton, and a couple of other smaller places around it in Geraldton have stopped them, the dive shop and places like that. But they're the main outlets. But otherwise, online, Westralian Books is the best way to go. That works out best for me. One of the things you've got to try and do is keep the price of the book down too. People don't want to pay $100 for a book, but $60 is fine.
Well, I was going to say that actually. I think that's a very reasonable price for the Abrolhos book, $60. I would have expected closer to maybe even $90 or something. So well done you for keeping that price down.
Just trying to use a different, just a narrow marketing process is part of that, and once again avoiding publishers who who've got to pay their staff and things and add that to the cost of books. It's kept it down, and I want to make it as accessible as possible, but I do have to pay a printer.
well, indeed. So now one last question I almost forgot, and it's a quirky little question on which to end, is we were talking about the title Abrolhos, Keep Your Eyes Open. What's the story behind that?
Well, essentially, that's what Abrolhos means, keep your eyes open. In the early days, the Portuguese were getting around to the Spice Islands, and they'd sweep across from Spain to the edge of the coast near Brazil. There's a set of islands there out in the open ocean, which are quite dangerous set of reefs as well, and so they got labelled on the maps as Abrolhos, which in Portuguese means essentially there's spiky objects. They'll even use it for things like double G's. And,
really?
So, Abrolhos, watch out, open your eyes, keep your eyes open. So it became apparently a term that sailors would use, that whether you were Dutch or Portuguese or Spanish or whatever, they all understood that if somebody shouted out Abrolhos, you need, have a look, watch it, what's going on, watch out. And so that's where the term originally came from. Now, when Frederick de Houtman came up the west coast of Australia, there was nothing on the charts map there except Shark Bay and a little bit to the north. And so he came in down near Cape Naturalist, tried to get ashore near Safety Bay, headed up along the coast and headed out to the safety of the open sea, and suddenly in the middle of the night saw these islands in front of him. And so he would have sketched on his map probably his empty space on the chart, Abrolhos, And so when they got back to the chart makers in the Netherlands, in Holland, they would have said, "Oh, we can't call these Abrolhos. We'll call them Houtman's Abrolhos." And so that's where the names comes from. So there's that part of it. But the other thing is, I wanted people to say, "Hey, look more closely at what it is you're seeing. Keep your eyes open. What are these little fish doing when you see them swimming around there and going on? What are the birds up to? Why is it so? What's been happening here in the past?" So that's what, it's a double entendre, I guess, there, really. Keep your eyes open, look closely at what you're seeing when you are out at the Abrolhos, and you'll get a lot more out of your visit there.
Oh, absolutely. So lots of different layers of meaning there, and it's exactly the same, and so many different layers to the Abrolhos as well. Well, look, Howard, thank you so much for joining us today on both Pod Street and the Pod Well Travelled. I will bid you good day, and in the meantime, I will go back to this back catalogue and decide which book. I think it's going to have to be Lucretia's Batavia Diary, which I'm going to delve into next.
Some people read that in one night, and the other people say, "Oh, it's an enjoyable book," and I said, "That story is not an enjoyable story at all."
Indeed.
Thanks very much, William. I really appreciate that, and all the best to you and your listeners.
You're absolutely welcome. Thank you again, Howard.
Thank you.